Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another animation breakdown. I'm not going to be doing a reaction this time. That's different. I know it may be confusing to some of you who are longtime watchers of my animation breakdowns. I usually do a reaction first, but I figured it was more just padding time. I really never say anything. I more just think through my thoughts and what I'm going to break down later, and I feel like they're just kind of wasting your time. So I'm just going to make them breakdowns from here on out. I'm going to be starting off every animation breakdown, letting people know I have watched the video as I am now, and what my breakdowns will be starting right after this. So if you haven't seen the animation, by all means go and watch it first, and then come back and watch this video, because I will be walking through it bit by bit. With that said, I also want to mention that I am not emotionally invested in these characters or this world, so if you are expecting me to know who any of these characters are, please don't. I don't know anything about it. I'm looking at the animation objectively. I'm just here to talk about techniques and practices. I don't know the lore, and I'm really not interested in getting into it. I'm just interested in animation. Where good animation comes from matters not to me. I just like it. So let's talk about the animation, shall we? Let's go. All right, so first things first. This little bone rotation, this dislocation of the shoulder was super neat. The way that they handled it was much more relaxed than I expected. Like, you clearly see the snap there, that separation, right? Just boom. But the rotation in the shadows and the dimples of the outfit, these little things right here, all they did was move them around a little bit, which is all you need to do to sell a rotation. But right when they make this like popping snap, adding these lines here really sell that quick jolt. So it's super minor, but it's one of those details where if they didn't have just that sectional lines there, it wouldn't have felt as much of an impact in the pop. Next is the expression that she strikes right here. This is nuts. This is the expression of somebody who is traditionally trained in 2D animation and has moved to 3D rigged character animation. This face, this level of intensity doesn't come from somebody who's been dabbling in 3D for a little bit. It comes from meticulous hours of drawing expressions and knowing how the face works. And even if they didn't work in 2D before they moved to 3D, like I'm saying they probably did, this is still hours of that effort being shown here. The impact there, and then you just see the head go down, but the face stays more rotated up at the camera in order to keep the expression to be a little bit more clear. The eyebrows are really the only part that seem to protrude out and kind of have a little bit of a cover, because like you watch around this area here as she comes back down, and you'll notice that there is some sort of a lip here, just on this line here, because it's getting covered as she rotates her head down. The mouth opening, of course, great addition because it shows extra exertion in the energy thrown into the hit. That's one of those things where they could have left her mouth closed like this, and it wouldn't have sold as well as if they had had their mouth open like they ended up doing. That was a very good use of that. Absolutely fantastic. This part right here, there's a lot of stuff right at the beginning that I wanted to talk about. They kind of came out the gate strong here. So when, of course, she jabs her fingers into the mouth of this, and then she rotates as she spins in order to flick it down. This isn't so much like a super, like, intricate shot concept, but the way it's executed is brilliant. Showing just the fingers rotating, and just from that alone, selling the understanding that she is rotating out of that backwards position she's in and planning on using that momentum to then fling it to the floor. Just brilliant use of space. Whoever came up with that idea, whoever was on the floor and was like, you know what would be really cool if we did this, they didn't get paid enough. Okay, they did not get paid enough. Double their salary. Right off here, I can make another comment about this great, whoever handled this character's expressions in these close-up shots, if it was one or multiple people, just they didn't get paid enough either. Just great use of expressions on her. Keeping the eyes bright, keeping the focus locked in like mad. I know this is many layers and many episodes deep into the lore of this game, but I mean, even if they started from scratch with episode 1 and this is like episode 15 or whatever, this is insane growth for that. I don't know if they had a studio that was used prior to this or if this was a newfound studio for this game, but either way, the people that are in it know what they're doing and they are not getting paid enough. Now here we've talked about impact frames a lot. If you haven't seen the episode that I talked about that a lot, and it was an Arknights one, you can see it up here in this corner. We talked about these a lot. This is just a very classic use of an impact frame, utilized extremely well. I loved the eye. I loved this inclusion. They didn't have to do that. They didn't have to have her eye there. But they decided that the focal point of the shot from this prior scene right here was the eye. And it is. But a lot of people wouldn't have included the eye in the impact. It points to the eye being a very unique and selected specifically portion of this character's traits. And we learn that later, even if you don't know any of the lore like I don't, that her eyes are important. So that alone was my first hint that this was going to be an interesting feature here. I love that they added that. Now this section here had something in it I did not expect, yet again putting focus on the eye. So of course she gets punched in the gut here. That never feels good. I know the feeling. But again, they added these bloodlines here, just the veins in the eye. Nobody would have added that otherwise, but it, again, is another force that the eye is important to this character. It's just these little things that subconsciously people grab a hold of, but maybe you just don't think about. And of course, as she passes out, the pupil going up into the top eyelid, it's a classic thing. That's not super unique as it is, but I'm glad they used it because a lot of animation wouldn't have gone that far to put that little extra spice into the shot to sell it just a little bit more. That's another thing that comes with a lot of watching, a lot of love, a lot of care and expressions, and whoever handled these, once again, not getting paid enough. Now this shot, as fucked up as it is, does something really interesting to me that I don't know if anyone really picks up on, notices, or thought about. These characters are posed as they are dancing. This may just be my own brain making up my own story of this, but this does feel to me like they are doing a dance of death sort of homage here because of the way that these characters are very strikingly posed, even in silhouette. But what's even more interesting about this is how differently they're silhouetted. That you could wrap that up to, it's what looked good, it's what felt right, but there's reasons to that. Silhouetting. If you don't know silhouetting, you're probably not an artist. If you are, even a little bit, you probably know what silhouettes are. A good silhouette sells a good pose. So in this case, this character here, she's got this very long, this great line of action, you know, this nice curve line of action, and it is just, it's so beautiful. There's a lot of energy here. You could just follow this character's curve all day. It's got a great sense of positioning. You can see the limbs where they're let out, where they're supposed to be. You can see the head. And from that, you can basically go, wow, that's a very graceful pose. An interesting choice for a death position. Whereas this character, almost completely the opposite. You really can't see too well that that's the arm. You can see that this is the legs, that like this is the torso section. That's all fine and good. But with how it's positioned and bent out of shape, the arms don't look comfortable. The legs don't really look comfortable. None of it feels quite right, which sells that this character is maybe a little bit more pain. But the fact that there's pain right next to what is framed as a blissful, joyous pose is a very good contrast. And again, one of those things where even if I am slightly overthinking it, is a very neat idea, if that was intentional. All right, so I wanted to talk about this sequence here because, I mean, look at these pajongus! These humongous humongumgus! I'm kidding. What I actually wanted to talk about were these hands. Anime does this a lot. It's one of those things that anime loves to do. It's a way of utilizing shadows in positive space while keeping negative colors, like all black, for example. What I like about this is that I can't really tell if this character is being surrounded by a 3D model, like a 3D hand that is being clasped around, which is more likely, which is then just painted over using 2D strokes, so that actually seem falsified. They seem like they're probably just textured vector lines that you can find in any vector program like Illustrator or Inkscape, where you can add these sorts of textures to all of these individual lines that are actually just vectors that are completely scalable, and that would probably help with flexibility a little bit. But it also seems like there are a lot of them, and some of them might be real and others might not be. But I still can't fully tell if there is a model around it or if they just decided to draw over the character. Given that there are sections like this one right here where the hand is coming out and there seems to be that separation right in the area where the hand is, and there's like a clear cutoff line, I do not believe that it is drawn over. I believe that that's a model that was then passed back over with some vector lines, or maybe just some actual hand sketches that they had plastered on the top, put a filter on it, and made it clear. So there's a lot of ways to do that, but I'm pretty sure the most sensible one, at very least, is just to have a 3D model with the character in it and drawing over it using vector lines. That's what I would personally do. All right, so this sequence here, of course, this one I had to talk about. This is just a super nice use of 3D camera in 3D space. You want to get from one side of a character to the other? Why not let the camera fly, literally? Using this space to do so always adds a good amount of dynamics, especially when it's used after a bunch of locked off shots or very close, tight shots like the first section was, where there's not a lot of movement. Then you have something like this that changes even the direction the short is taking visually, which can pivot the entire mood of what you're watching, and is a very unique use case, but a very useful one. In this case, I'm assuming that they're trying to push the turning the tides mentality that is clearly about to happen. This is something that happens really quick, but I thought was totally worth adding. Clearly, you have a 3D model here going through the pace of doing this motion and making this rotation. Looks great. But then they included a 2D smear frame for the foot to sell that extra pass. So you get these lines here, and these happen in a lot of animation. And even if you don't notice that they're always there. Look through your favorite 2D animated films especially, you will find a smear frame everywhere. They're in basically every Disney movie. They're all over the place. But they are super useful to help sell speed. When you add them on top of CG animation like this, it's one of those hybrid concepts that you really can't do as well in CG, and that's just because drawing it is so much more controllable and a lot easier to manage than trying to deform an entire 3D model, albeit that does still happen and is utilized. Stuff like this, where it's only there for a frame or two, usually just drawing it in is perfectly serviceable, and it sells just as well, if not better. And here, of course, is exactly the payoff I was talking about with this eyeball earlier. All that set up subconsciously to show you exactly what you may have been thinking without knowing you were thinking it. That eye is important. It's a character in and of itself. Very well done. Right here, there's really not much for me to talk about animation-wise, but just look how beautiful this shot is, right? Just look how beautiful that is. There's so much good to this. It's just pretty to look at. The composition is fantastic. She's all center frame. Everything surrounding her. All of these curves here are just isolating the character into the center of the frame even more. Very well done, just as far as layout goes. Brilliant. And here we have this beautiful evolution of flame here. I don't know if I can talk too much about it because I'm not much of an effects animator. I've always been a character guy. But this is still beautiful. This transition, using this huge ring here that appears, is just, it's like breaking a sound barrier, but in fire. That's sick as hell. Using it as an excuse to grow the flame within those bounds to show that extra power burst. I do love the shape of this flame too. It almost comes out like a hook, which is a very common way to do animated flames, especially in a more cartoony visual style, but I love it nonetheless. It just carries so much energy, and fire needs to, right? And when it explodes, we've also talked about chromatic aberration before, but like, look how pretty that is. Having those colors aberrate to sell the extra power behind the flame, once again, great idea. All those sparks that were happening earlier, it all works together in a beautiful unison. So I love this sequence here too, because this one has a really neat little thing that happens in addition to the effects. I do love these little flicks coming off the outfit, and it's just they look like flames. They tie the character into that. Not to mention, of course, the flames above and everything else, but that alone is just a really cool addition to tie the character down and into that motion that was happening all around them. Now, this sequence here, I'm actually running off of a theory that this might be inspired, at least, by an Itano circus. Ichiro Itano, he kind of did this in a lot of series, and people just started doing it as an homage to him. So an Itano circus is kind of this concept here of these sprawling, usually they're like energy or rockets that are sprawling around, and the characters flying through and dancing around them in space. And it is something that, especially in the 2D world, sucks to animate, but it looks so cool. And CG has, of course, made Itano circuses a lot more accessible because you can kind of place them wherever. So I wonder if in this sequence they weren't inspired by that concept, probably from other anime or something, but I love the way it looks, and it really does help sell that energy. All right, somebody call Yo Yoshinari. They stole the Kill la Kill thing. If these are not Ryoko Matoi's eyes, I don't know what are. Look at that. Look at this face. That is Ryoko energy 100%. That is Kill la Kill. That is so Kill la Kill. I just love the way it looks. Again, using these sketch lines to show negative space in a place where there is no color. Presumably this is entirely white, but you can tell what the expression is very clearly. They don't hide that. It's just a very neat way of showing it. If I haven't said it enough, I'm going to say it again. Pay the people who did the expressions in this more. Now here's an animation thing I can talk about real quick. Using the eyes to lead direction. This is something that people do in real life that you don't even notice half the time. When you look somewhere, your eyes usually lead the motion. You're not turning your whole head and your eyes are locked in your head. Usually when you hear something or you notice something, your eyes turn before your head does. Even if it's by milliseconds, that difference does matter. So right here, because we are actually focused on this boost in color, it's the difference of color that we are focused on, we're not looking over here at the character that is appearing on screen until this character starts to look over, and they lead with their eyes, then their head. That's just how you do it. Lead with the eyes. If you are going to animate somebody turning slowly or looking at something, use the eyes to show direction. You don't have to use the whole body. And right here we yet again have another use of chromatic aberration to show that raging energy. And it's really cool to see it in the eyes, especially because of the blues separating into green that's right in here, and the eyebrows that are dark are separating into red to blend the whole character in. Of course, it's happening everywhere else on screen as well, but it's just really neat to see it in that bloom of the blue eyes. And I almost skipped right past this, but the inclusion of blue flames in order to tie the blue eyes into this shot and having that burst of color is just it's so good. And our final little impact frame here. First of all, this frame alone that I paused on just looks beautiful. You can tell exactly where the energy starts, where it's all going. You can see these hooks that I mentioned before that I love. It's just such a good, lively way of showing energy. But anyway, back to the impact frames. Right there, little black hole. That's all it is. Could fit Porky Pig in there. And then immediately inverting that, adding some of the flames back in there, just having a little bit of fun with these color inversions all the way through. And yeah, that's basically it. So I hope you enjoyed my little breakdowns there. I know this was kind of different for those who have been watching my animation breakdowns before to not have a reaction in the front of it, but I figured it was just a bit of a waste of time on the video more than it was anything else. So I hope you enjoyed it either way. If you want to support me, feel free to do so. You know how to do that. You know where to find me. It'll all be in the end screen coming up in a few seconds, and I will see all of you in the next video. Goodbye!